The first thing I want to clarify is that I haven't been drinking. I know how this sounds. I know what kind of report this reads like. But I've been driving municipal transit for 11 years without a single incident. No accidents, no disciplinary flags, no failed drug screenings. My CDL is current. My medical certification is current. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that what I'm describing is not impairment. It's a scheduling anomaly, and I've been documenting it for 7 weeks. My name is Caroline Mays. I drive for the Steubenville Area Transit Authority, SATA, in Eastern Ohio. If you don't know Steubenville, that's fine. Most people don't. It's a river city on the Ohio side, across from Weirton, population declining since the steel mills closed, and the transit system reflects that. And we run 12 fixed routes across the city and into the near suburbs, most of them on reduced schedules since 2019. Ridership is low. Some routes I drive, I'll pick up 8 or 9 people across a full 4-hour shift, sometimes fewer. I've driven entire loops with an empty bus, just me in the seats, in the river showing between the buildings when the road turns east. I'm not complaining. I like the work. I like the routine of it, the schedule, the sequence, the mechanical rhythm of stops and doors and the hiss of the brakes. I like knowing where I'll be at 2:15 on a Tuesday. I like the fact that a bus route is a promise. This vehicle will be at this corner at this time. It's one of the few promises the city still keeps. When the schedule is generated weekly by the dispatch system, an old software platform called TransOps that's been running since 2011 and that nobody fully understands anymore. The IT contractor who set it up moved to Colorado years ago. He left a manual, but it's 300 pages and most of it covers features we've never used. What matters is that every Friday, each driver gets a printout in their mailbox showing next week's assignments, which routes, which shifts, which bus number. The system handles rotation, seniority, required rest gaps, all of it. My supervisor, Pat Diorio, reviews the printouts before they go out, but she told me once that she's never changed one. The system knows what it's doing, she said. I just make sure no one got assigned a day off on a holiday. I've been on the same rotation for about 2 years. Mondays and Tuesdays, I drive Route 7. That's the South End Loop, mostly residential. Wednesdays, I drive Route 12, which runs from the university out to the mall and back. Thursdays and Fridays, I alternate between Route 3 and Route 9, depending on seniority shuffles. 7 weeks ago on a Friday, I opened my mailbox and found my printout for the following week. Monday, Route 7, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Tuesday, Route 7, same shift. Wednesday, Route 12, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Thursday, Route 44A, 5:15 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. I read it twice. I didn't recognize the route number. SATA operates routes 1 through 12. That's it. There used to be more. Back when the city was bigger and the mills were running, the system went up to Route 22. But those were cut decades ago. The highest active route number is 12. There is no Route 44. There is no Route 44A. When the A suffix isn't even a convention we use. Some larger transit systems use letter suffixes for route variants, express versions, peak hour deviations. But we've never done that. We don't have enough routes or riders to justify variants. I assumed it was a system error. TransOps is old software running on old hardware, and glitches happen. 2 years ago, a driver named Rick Modell got a printout that assigned him to Route 0, which the system apparently generated by dividing something by something it shouldn't have. Pat caught it, laughed, reassigned him manually. These things happen. I brought the printout to Pat on Monday morning. She was in her office, a converted storage room near the dispatch window, barely big enough for a desk and a filing cabinet, always smelling faintly of the heating vent that runs along the ceiling and pushes air that's either too warm or carries the metallic tang of the old ductwork. I showed her the printout. She looked at it. She looked at me. She looked at it again. 44A, she said, reading it like she was tasting something unfamiliar. It's not a real route, I said. No, it's not. She turned to her computer and pulled up the dispatch interface. She typed in the route number. The system returned a result. Not an error, not a blank screen. A result. Route 44A. Assigned vehicle, Bus 917. Shift time, 5:15 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Driver, Maze C. And below that, a route map. Pat clicked on the map. It loaded slowly, the way everything loads slowly on her 10-year-old desktop with the fan that sounds like a small animal in distress. When the map showed a route I didn't recognize, it ran through the eastern part of the city, down 4th Street, across the Market Street Bridge, then into a series of turns through neighborhoods that I couldn't immediately place, even though I've been driving Steubenville for over a decade. The streets had names. The stops were marked with small blue dots, 12 of them, spaced evenly across a loop that returned to the downtown transit center. Those aren't our streets, I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Some of them looked right. 4th Street, yes. Market Street, yes. But after the bridge, the route turned onto something called Harmon Avenue, then Dresser Street, then a long stretch on Colliery Road. And I knew those names, vaguely, the way you know a word you've read but never spoken. They existed somewhere in the back of my knowledge of this city, in the layer beneath active memory. Pat stared at the screen for a while. Then she said, "System's probably pulling from an old route database, the pre-2004 network. Some of those streets might have been renamed or closed." She closed the map. "I'll put you on Route 3 for Thursday instead. Ignore it." She printed a corrected schedule. I took it. I put it in my locker. I drove my normal routes Monday through Wednesday without incident. On Thursday morning, I opened my locker to get my schedule and found 2 printouts. The corrected one Pat had given me, Route 3 for Thursday, and beneath it, a second printout, identical to the original, with Route 44A, 5:15 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., Thursday. Same bus number, 917. I hadn't put the original printout in my locker. I'd left it on Pat's desk. I was certain of that. I remembered setting it down next to her keyboard, the corner of the page slightly bent from where I'd folded it in my back pocket. I remembered her picking it up and placing it in her outbox tray, which she uses for documents she intends to shred. The printout in my locker was not bent. It was crisp, clean, as if freshly printed, but it was identical in every other way. Same font, same layout, same route map preview in the bottom corner. I showed it to Pat. She frowned and said, "That's weird. System must have regenerated it overnight." She took it, dropped it in her shred pile, and told me to take bus 310 out on Route 3 at 1 p.m. I drove Route 3, normal shift, 7 passengers total. And I finished at 5:10 p.m. and pulled bus 310 into the lot and walked past the row of parked buses toward the driver's entrance. And that's when I saw bus 917. It was parked at the end of the row, in a spot that's usually empty. 917 is an older model, a 2008 Gillig low floor that should have been decommissioned 2 years ago, but keeps passing inspection by narrow margins. I knew the bus. Every driver knows every bus. 917 has a slow leak in the rear air suspension that makes it sag slightly to the left when it's parked. The interior lights have a yellow cast because the LED retrofit missed that unit. The driver's seat has a tear in the vinyl on the left bolster that someone patched with duct tape that's since peeled halfway off. The bus was running, engine idling, interior lights on, that sickly yellow, destination sign lit, with displaying in amber block letters, 44 a colliery. I stood in the lot and looked at it for what felt like a long time, but was probably 30 seconds. The lot was empty except for the parked buses. The dispatch window was dark. Pat leaves at 5 o'clock. The evening supervisor, Thomas, wouldn't arrive until 5:30 for the night routes. I was alone with an idling bus that was displaying a route that didn't exist, assigned to me on a schedule that had been shredded twice. I got on the bus. I want to explain why, because I've asked myself this question every day since, and the answer is always the same, and the answer is unsatisfying. It felt like going to work. Not an adventure, not a compulsion, not curiosity exactly. It felt like what I do. A bus was running, a route was assigned, my name was on the schedule. For 11 years, and that sequence has meant one thing: drive. The reflex was stronger than the strangeness. The routine swallowed the question. The driver's seat was adjusted to my settings. I'm 5 feet 6 inches with a short torso, so I keep the seat forward and raised higher than most drivers. Those were my settings. The mirrors were angled the way I angle them, slightly wider on the right to compensate for the blind spot on Gillig models. The fare box was on, displaying the current date and the route number, 44A. The radio was set to channel 4, which is our dispatch frequency, but when I keyed the mic, I got silence. Not static, not dead air. Silence, the kind that has presence, that suggests a room on the other end that is occupied but not responding. The route map was loaded on the GPS display, an aftermarket unit bolted to the dash, with a kind that shows the route as a blue line with stop markers. I followed it. I pulled out of the lot at 5:18 p.m., 3 minutes behind the schedule I hadn't decided to follow, and turned left onto 4th Street. The first 4 stops were normal. Normal streets, normal intersections, normal Steubenville. I knew every pothole, every traffic light cycle, every spot where the pavement dips near a storm drain. No one was waiting at the first 3 stops. At the 4th, the corner of 4th and Adams, a woman boarded, 60s, heavy coat, canvas shopping bag. She swiped a bus pass without looking at me, which is standard. Most regulars don't look at the driver. She sat in the 3rd row, left side, and set her bag on the adjacent seat. I didn't recognize her. That alone was unusual. After 11 years, I know most of the regular riders, or at least by face. Steubenville isn't big enough for anonymity, but I didn't think much of it. New riders happen. The GPS told me to turn right after the Market Street Bridge onto Harmon Avenue. I'd crossed the Market Street Bridge thousands of times. The east side of the river is Steubenville's older residential area. Blocks of narrow houses on hills, streets that curve to follow the terrain, churches on every 3rd corner. I knew it well, but when I turned onto Harmon Avenue, I was somewhere I'd never been. The street was residential, tree-lined, gently curving, physically consistent with the east side neighborhoods I knew. The houses were the right era, the right style, wood frame, narrow lots, covered porches. But the street itself, the name, the sequence, the specific curve, was new to me. And I'm not unfamiliar in the way a place is unfamiliar when you haven't visited recently. Unfamiliar the way a room is unfamiliar when someone has rearranged the furniture while you were asleep. The elements were right. The composition was wrong. I checked the GPS. The blue line ran confidently ahead. The next stop was marked at Harmon and Dresser, 0.3 miles. I kept driving. At the Harmon and Dresser stop, 2 people boarded. A man in work coveralls, steel-toed boots, the kind of deep-set fatigue in his face that comes from physical labor on a 12-hour cycle, and a younger woman, maybe 30, dark hair pulled back, wearing a uniform I recognized as the smock they use at the Valley Medical Center cafeteria. Except Valley Medical closed its cafeteria in 2021 and replaced it with vending machines. I remembered because 3 of my regular riders on Route 7 used to work there and stopped boarding after they lost their shifts. Both swiped bus passes. Both sat without looking at me. The man took the back of the bus. The woman sat in the middle, 1 row behind the first passenger. I drove on. Dresser Street became Colliery Road, a long, slightly climbing stretch that the GPS showed running for 1.8 miles through what I would have expected to be the Hill District. A part of the city I'd driven through hundreds of times on Route 9. But Colliery Road didn't feel like the Hill District. The houses were older, more closely packed, and several had lights on in the windows, warm and yellow. The kind of light that comes from incandescent bulbs, not the blue-white of LEDs that most houses have switched to. And I saw curtains in patterns I associated with my grandmother's house. Heavy floral prints, the kind nobody buys anymore. I saw a porch with a metal glider, the old-fashioned kind with the shell-shaped back, painted green, and someone was sitting on it, an older man. He watched the bus pass with the disinterested gaze of someone who has watched buses pass on this street his entire life. At the next stop, Colliery and Mill, four more people boarded. Each one swiped a pass. Each one sat down without speaking. Each one looked like someone I almost recognized, in the way that a face can feel familiar without being placeable. A shape of the jaw, a posture, a way of holding the hands. The feeling accumulated. By the sixth stop, I had 11 passengers, and the bus felt like a room full of people I'd met once at a gathering I couldn't remember attending. None of them spoke. Not to me, not to each other. This was unusual. SATA riders aren't boisterous, but there's always ambient sound. A phone call, a cough, the rustle of a bag, the particular creak that older passengers make when they shift in the hard plastic seats. Bus 917 was quiet, not silent. I could hear the engine, the air system, the tires on pavement, but human quiet, as though the passengers were holding something in reserve. None of them pulled the cord. Every bus has a pull cord or push strip that passengers use to signal they want the next stop. It triggers a chime and lights up a stop requested sign near the driver. On Route 44A, for the full duration of that first trip, no one pulled the cord. I stopped at every marked stop because the GPS indicated I should, and at some stops, new passengers boarded, and at no stop did anyone exit. I completed the loop, 12 stops, roughly 90 minutes, and returned to the transit center at 7:02 p.m. When I opened the doors, the passengers stood up, in order, front to back, and exited in single file. Orderly, unhurried. Each one stepped off the bus and walked into the parking lot, and I lost track of them in the gathering dark, one by one, the way you lose track of a sentence that trails off without ending. I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes. The GPS display showed the route map, the loop completed, the blue line now a closed circle. Then the display went dark. Not off. The unit was still powered, but the screen was black, and as if the route had been erased from the system now that it was finished. I went home. I ate dinner. David, my ex-husband, we've been divorced for 3 years, but I still think of him as David rather than my ex-husband, which is probably relevant to what happened later. David had the kids that week, so the house was empty. I sat at the kitchen table with a plate of pasta I don't remember making and tried to reconstruct Colliery Road in my mind. I couldn't. Not the way I can reconstruct any other street in Steubenville. I could remember driving it. I could remember the houses, the glider, the man on the porch. But when I tried to place it, to connect it to the surrounding streets, to locate it on the mental map I carry of this city, it slid away, like trying to remember where a dream took place. The content was clear, and the location was gone. The next week, Route 44A appeared on my schedule again, Thursday 5:15 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. I checked with Pat. She checked the system. The system showed 44A as an active route assigned to me. Pat said, "I thought I deleted that." She deleted it again. She showed me the confirmation screen. Route 44A removed from schedule. On Thursday, bus 917 was idling in the lot at 5:10 p.m. Destination sign, 44 Colliery. Seat adjusted to my settings. Mirrors angled to my preference. Fare box on, radio silent, GPS loaded. I drove it again. This is where I should tell you something about how the route felt, because the feeling is part of the documentation, and I've come to believe the feeling is more accurate than the data. Driving Route 44A felt like fluency. I'm a good driver. 11 years, no incidents. I know these streets by muscle memory, but 44A was different. Every curve arrived exactly when I expected it. Every stop was spaced at the interval that felt most natural for braking. The timing of the traffic lights, and there were traffic lights, old-style hanging signals with the green, yellow, red vertical stack. Not the horizontal kind the city switched to in 2015. The timing was perfect. I never stopped unnecessarily. I never had to wait. The route flowed. It was the most satisfying driving I'd ever done, in the way that a perfectly weighted tool is satisfying, in the way that a sentence with no wasted words is satisfying. It felt designed for me, not for a driver, for me. I noticed that the second week. By the third week, I'd started noticing other things. My driving on the regular routes was changing, not deteriorating, the opposite. I was becoming more precise. My stops were smoother. My timing was tighter. I was hitting my schedule marks within 30 seconds, consistently, across every route, which is unusual. Most drivers fluctuate by 2 or 3 minutes depending on traffic and boarding time. I was locked in. Pat noticed. She mentioned it during a routine review. Your schedule adherence is 98% this month. That's the highest in the division. She said it approvingly. She didn't ask why. I knew why. I was driving the regular routes the way I drove 44A, with the same anticipation, the same rhythm, the same fluid certainty about what came next. The 44A was teaching me, not through instruction, not through feedback, through repetition, through the physical experience of a route that fit me perfectly, that rewarded precision with smoothness, that made every correct action feel inevitable. I was learning a way of driving that didn't come from SATA's training program or from 11 years of experience. It came from Thursday evenings on streets I couldn't find on a map. I should have found this alarming. I found it gratifying. That's an important distinction, and I'm documenting it because I think the gratification was part of the system. The route made me better. Better felt good. Feeling good made me want to drive the route again. The loop was clean, self-reinforcing, and I didn't see it as a loop. I saw it as professional development. By the fourth week, I'd started adjusting my habits on the other days to protect Thursday. Small things. I stopped accepting overtime shifts that might conflict with the 44A schedule. And I started going to bed earlier on Wednesday nights, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to be sharp for Thursday. I noticed I was eating differently on Thursdays, lighter meals, more water, as though preparing for something physically demanding, which driving a bus is not. These were small behavioral shifts, each one reasonable in isolation, each one oriented toward a single point in my week. And then there were the passengers. By the fourth week, I'd carried approximately 60 different individuals on Route 44A across 4 shifts. I recognized none of them from my regular routes, but I was starting to recognize them from somewhere else. It began with the woman from the first trip, the one in the heavy coat with the shopping bag. On my third 44A shift, she boarded at the same stop, 4th and Adams, wearing the same coat. This time as she passed me to sit down, I saw her face clearly in the overhead mirror, and something connected. Not a name, not a context, a feeling, specific and physical, like the taste of a food you haven't eaten since childhood. I knew her face from somewhere, not Steubenville, not my adult life, somewhere deeper, somewhere archived. That night after the shift, I went through my mother's photo albums. My mother died in 2018, and I'd kept 2 albums, the ones she'd assembled in the 80s and 90s, full of faded prints with rounded corners and timestamps in orange along the bottom edge. I sat on my living room floor and turned pages for an hour. I found her on page 37 of the second album, a neighborhood barbecue summer, probably 1989. My mother was in the background holding a paper plate. In the foreground, sitting in a lawn chair with a can of something in her hand, was a woman in a dark blouse with a broad, serious face and hair pinned up on one side. It was the same woman, 35 years younger, but the same woman. The jaw, the way she held her chin slightly raised, the set of her eyes. I was certain. I was absolutely certain, and I am still certain. And I know what certainty is worth in a situation like this. Very little. But I'm reporting what I observed. I didn't know her name. My mother might have. My mother who was dead. I closed the album. The next Thursday I watched the passengers more carefully. I watched without being obvious about it, checking the interior mirror, noting faces as they boarded. I recognized 3 more. Not from photos this time, from memory. A man with a limp who sat in the priority seating up front. I knew his walk. I knew the specific hitch in his left leg, the way he compensated with his shoulder. I'd seen that walk before, but I couldn't place where. A teenage girl who boarded at colliery and mill with earbuds in, not connected to anything, the cord dangling into an empty jacket pocket. Her face had the particular narrow bone structure of a family I'd known when I was young. A family on my block growing up in Wintersville, the Coladas family, who had 3 daughters and moved to Columbus in 1994. She could have been a Coladas. She could have been a cousin. She was the right age to be a granddaughter. But she boarded my bus on a street I can't find on a map, in a neighborhood that doesn't exist during my other shifts, and she was wearing earbuds connected to nothing. Listening to silence, and I'm not sure could have been, is the framework that applies here. By the 5th week, I was keeping a log, not for SATA. This was personal. A small notebook I kept in my jacket pocket, the kind with the elastic band closure. After each 44A shift, I'd sit in the lot after the passengers exited and write down everything I could remember. Stop locations, boarding counts, physical descriptions, any detail that seemed significant. I dated each entry. I timed my observations. I was thorough. I was thorough because thoroughness was the only thing I could control. The route was beyond my control. It appeared on my schedule regardless of Pat's corrections. Bus 917 was always ready. The GPS always loaded. The passengers were beyond my control. They boarded. They sat. They didn't speak. And they didn't exit until the loop was complete. My own responses were increasingly beyond my control. The gratification, the precision-seeking, the Thursday-oriented restructuring of my entire week. But the notebook was mine. The observations were mine. The act of writing was a way of maintaining a boundary between participation and documentation, or that's what I told myself. Looking at the notebook now, I noticed something I didn't notice while I was writing in it. The handwriting changes, not dramatically. It's all recognizably my handwriting. But the early entries are written quickly, with the slight forward slant and uneven pressure that characterize my normal writing. By the 4th week, the entries are slower, more even, more controlled. The letters are more uniform. The spacing is more precise. My handwriting was becoming like my driving, smoother, more calibrated, more optimized. I didn't decide to change my handwriting. I didn't practice. The change happened in the same way the driving changes happened. Through repetition, through the physical experience of a system that rewarded precision, applied to an activity I performed immediately after each shift, while the route's rhythm was still in my body. The route was training my hands the way it trained my feet and my timing. The notebook wasn't a boundary, it was homework. In the 6th week, 2 things happened that I need to describe separately because they belong to different categories of wrong. The first, I was driving Route 7 on a Tuesday morning, my normal South End loop, and I turned onto Slack Street, which I've driven approximately 500 times. Halfway down the block, I saw a house I didn't recognize. A wood-frame 2-story, white with green shutters, set back slightly from the sidewalk with a concrete staircase leading up to the porch. It was not a new construction. The style was consistent with the 1940s housing stock that makes up most of Slack Street. It looked like it had always been there, but I had no memory of it. I slowed the bus. I looked at the house. A woman was standing on the porch looking at the bus. She was holding a coffee mug. She looked like someone I'd seen on 44A, one of the regular passengers from the Dresser Street stop, a quiet woman in her 40s who always sat on the right side near the back. The woman on the porch watched me pass. She didn't wave. She didn't react. She just watched with the same patient, in undemanding attention that all the 44A passengers seemed to share. I drove on. When I came back around on my second loop, 45 minutes later, the house was there. Same house, same shutters, same staircase. No woman on the porch. On my third loop, the house was not there. In its place was a narrow vacant lot with a chain-link fence and a real estate sign so faded I couldn't read the text. The lot looked like it had been vacant for years. Weeds in the foundation cracks. Litter against the fence. No staircase. No porch. no green shutters. I checked my logbook that night. I'd driven Slack Street on the previous Tuesday and noted nothing unusual. But when I looked at the entry, there was a line I didn't remember writing. Slack Street, green shutters, back from sidewalk, matches 44 address or passenger. The note was in my handwriting, and the improved precise post 44A handwriting. It was dated the previous Tuesday, 6 days before I saw the house. I read the line several times. I turned the page back and forth. The ink was consistent with the rest of the entry. It wasn't added later. It was written in sequence as part of my normal post-shift log on a day when I had not seen the house. I had documented something 6 days before it happened, or I had seen the house a week earlier and had no memory of it, but my hands had recorded it anyway. I don't know which explanation is worse. The second thing that happened in the 6th week was the conversation with David. He called me on a Wednesday night. The kids were back with me that week. Leo, 9, and Sarah, 12, and they were upstairs doing homework while I sat in the kitchen with the phone. David called to discuss the summer schedule. Normal co-parenting logistics. We talked for about 15 minutes, and then he said, "Caroline, have you been driving past the house?" Our old house, the house we'd shared during the marriage, on Belmont Avenue. He still lived there. "No," I said. "Why?" "The kids said they saw a bus go past on Saturday. Number 917. They recognized it because you told them once that you don't like driving that bus." I had told them that. 917 is the one with the sagging suspension and the yellow lights. I'd mentioned it once, a throwaway comment. "I wasn't driving on Saturday," I said. "I was home. We went to the grocery store, remember? I sent you a photo of Leo picking out cereal." "I know. That's why it's weird. They said it drove past around 4 in the afternoon. Slow, like it was running a route. But there's no bus route on Belmont." "There isn't. Belmont Avenue is a residential side street in a neighborhood that no SATA route serves. No bus has any reason to be there." "Maybe it was repositioning," I said. "Drivers sometimes take residential streets to get back to the lot." "Maybe," David said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "They said it drove past twice." After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. I could hear the kids upstairs. Leo's voice narrating something to himself the way he does when he's drawing. Sarah's music playing faintly through her door. Normal sounds. My house, my children. My kitchen table with the scratch on the corner from when Leo dragged a toy across it 2 years ago. Bus 917 had driven past my ex-husband's house on a Saturday afternoon while I was at the grocery store. And I checked the SATA vehicle log the next morning. 917 was recorded as parked in the lot all day Saturday. No mileage logged, no driver assigned. I should tell you about the 7th Thursday. The route was the same. It's always the same. The same streets, the same stops, the same 12 blue dots on the GPS. But the passengers were different this time, and different isn't the right word. They were closer. The recognition I'd been feeling, that nagging, almost placeable familiarity, had sharpened. I wasn't almost recognizing them anymore. I was recognizing them, and then losing the recognition, the way you lose a word on the tip of your tongue. Present, imminent, and then gone, replaced by the ache of its absence. At the third stop, a man boarded who looked like my father. My father died in 2006. Heart attack, sudden, went at the kitchen table on a Thursday morning. I was 23. He was 51. The man who boarded bus 917 on Route 44A was about 50, with my father's build, short, broad-shouldered, carrying weight in his midsection. And my father's walk, which was more of a controlled fall forward, always slightly ahead of his own center of gravity. He wore a jacket I didn't recognize. He didn't look at me. He swiped his pass and sat in the middle of the bus and looked out the window. I watched him in the mirror for the entire route. He didn't move. He didn't turn. He sat with his hands on his knees the way my father sat in waiting rooms, and looked out the window at streets that don't exist. And I drove, and I was precise, and the route flowed, and I didn't cry because crying would have disrupted the rhythm. And I understood, in the way that a muscle understands emotion, that the rhythm was more important than the grief, that the route needed me focused. That precision was how I honored whatever this was. I noted this thought afterward. I noted it because it frightened me. Not the thought itself, which felt true and right in the moment, but the fact that I could think it. The fact that a system of driving a bus on phantom streets could supersede a grief response triggered by seeing my dead father's face. The route had not just trained my timing and my handwriting, it had trained my emotional priorities. It had taught me that the most important thing, at any given moment, was to drive the route well. And I was driving it so well. 98% schedule adherence on my regular routes had become 99. When Pat had started using me as a benchmark. "Drive it like Maze drives it," she told a new hire. And she meant it as a compliment, and I received it as one, and the part of me that was still capable of stepping outside the pattern noted that I was receiving professional praise for skills I'd developed on a route that my employer didn't know existed, on a bus that wasn't supposed to be moving, on streets that disappeared when I wasn't scheduled to be on them. The part of me that noted this did not do anything with the observation. It noted, and it filed, and it moved on. Just like the notebook, just like the log, documentation is digestion, record it, and it doesn't need to be felt. 3 days ago, Monday, I drove Route 7 as usual. Normal shift, normal ridership. But at 8:45 a.m., between stops, I glanced at the GPS display and saw something that made me pull the bus to the shoulder and stop. The GPS was showing two routes. Route 7 in its normal blue line, running its normal loop, and beneath it, fainter, in a color I'd describe as amber, the same amber as 917's destination sign. A second route. Route 44A, running parallel to Route 7 for about a mile, then diverging east toward the river, towards streets I couldn't name on a map but that I recognized from Thursday evenings. The 44A trace wasn't supposed to be visible. I wasn't on the 44A schedule. It wasn't Thursday. Bus 917 was in the lot. But the route was there on my screen, ghosted behind my active route, like a watermark on a page. I sat at the shoulder for 2 minutes. The 44A trace pulsed faintly, the way a cursor blinks. Present, absent, present, absent. And then it stabilized. Then it began to move. Not with me, I was stationary. The amber line began to advance along the 44A route, stop by stop, at approximately the speed a bus would travel, as though someone, something, was driving the route without me, as though the route was running itself on a Monday morning, off schedule, and wanted me to know. I watched it complete the loop in 17 minutes, 12 stops. When it returned to the transit center on the display, it paused for 30 seconds. Then it started again. A second loop. Same speed, same stops. I pulled back into traffic and finished my shift. The 44A trace was still running on my display when I returned to the lot. It ran 3 complete loops during my 4-hour shift. I watched it between stops, in the mirror, the way you watch weather approaching from a distance. It was consistent. It was precise. It drove the route better than I did. The timing between stops was more even, the speed more uniform. Whatever was driving Route 44A on my GPS display had learned from my 7 weeks of Thursday shifts and had refined the pattern beyond what I could achieve. I noted this in my logbook. I noted the times, the intervals, the number of loops. My handwriting was very even, very controlled. I didn't notice until later that I'd drawn small circles at each stop point, 12 of them, evenly spaced like the blue dots on the GPS. I hadn't intended to draw them. They were just there, in my handwriting, in my notebook, integrated into the entry as though they were a natural part of documentation. Today is Wednesday. Tomorrow is Thursday. Route 44A is on my schedule. I checked this morning. Even though I told myself I wouldn't check, the way I told myself I wouldn't adjust my dinner plans, the way I told myself I wouldn't go to bed early, the way I told myself I wouldn't stop accepting Thursday overtime. I checked, and it's there. And bus 917 is assigned, and the shift starts at 5:15 p.m. and I have spent today writing this because I want a record of my state of mind before tomorrow's shift. Here is my state of mind. I am afraid, but the fear is located in a specific place. It's not generalized anxiety. It's the fear of a specific realization that I've been circling for 7 weeks and that I'm going to state now, plainly, because it needs to be in this document. The passengers on Route 44A have never pulled the cord because they have already arrived. They are not traveling to a destination. They are on the destination. In the bus is the destination. The route is the destination. They board and they sit and they ride and they are home. The woman in the heavy coat, the man in coveralls, the Coladas girl, my father. They're not going anywhere. They are already where they belong. The route doesn't take them somewhere. It is somewhere. And every Thursday I drive through it, and I am the most precise, the most calibrated, the most perfectly functioning version of myself, and that is not a coincidence. That is the route working. That is the destination reaching up through the steering wheel and the brake pedal and the rhythm of the stops and teaching me what it feels like to be somewhere you belong completely, to be held by a system that fits you exactly. And the fear, the specific fear, is that it's working. Because here is the other thing I need to document. The house on Slack Street, the one with the green shutters that appeared and disappeared, I drove past it on Tuesday. It was there. It has been there every day this week. I checked the property records at the county office. The house exists. It has existed since 1947. It has a history, an owner, a tax record. It is a real house on a real street that I have driven past 500 times, but I have no memory of it from before Route 44A. And last night, sitting in my kitchen after the kids went to bed, I looked around the room. At the table, the scratch from Leo's toy, the refrigerator with Sarah's school schedule pinned under a magnet, and the room felt thin, not unreal, thin, like a photograph of a room rather than a room, like a place I was looking at through glass. I got up and walked to the front window and looked at the street. My street, my neighborhood, the street light on the corner, the neighbor's truck, the cracked sidewalk I've walked 10,000 times. It looked like a route I'd been assigned, not a place I lived. A route, a sequence of stops, front door, mailbox, car, intersection, that I traveled out of professional obligation, precisely, efficiently, and without the feeling of arrival that I get on Thursday evenings when bus 917 turns onto Colliery Road and the passengers are waiting and the lights in the old houses are warm and yellow and the timing is perfect and everything is where it should be. I'm going to drive Route 44A tomorrow. I know that. I'm not going to refuse. I'm not going to call in sick. I'm not going to ask Pat to intervene again, because the system will regenerate the assignment and the bus will be idling and the seat will be adjusted and the mirrors will be set and the GPS will be loaded and I will drive it because driving it is the thing I do best. And the route knows that, and I know the route knows that, and I'm documenting this because I want someone to understand that I am aware of what's happening and I am unable to make that awareness matter. Leo asked me yesterday what my favorite route was. He's 9. He likes buses the way 9-year-olds like buses, mechanically, enthusiastically, without complication. I said Route 7 because that's what I should say, because Route 7 is real and runs through real streets and has passengers who pull the cord and exit and go to their real houses. But the word felt wrong in my mouth, inaccurate, like giving the wrong answer on a form. And I thought, next time he asks, I might say something different. Not because I want to, because accuracy matters, and the most accurate answer is changing, and I don't know how to stop it, and the route is on my schedule, and the bus is in the lot, and it's Wednesday night, and the house is quiet, and the kitchen light is on, and it doesn't feel like anything anymore. Tomorrow at 5:15 it will. I just checked the kitchen clock. It's 9:47 p.m. I'm going to put this notebook in the drawer and go to bed. I'm going to sleep, and in the morning I'll make breakfast for the kids and drive them to school, and then I'll drive Route 7, and then I'll come home, and then it will be Thursday. There's something I haven't written yet because I've been saving it. And I've been saving it because once it's documented, it becomes real in a way I can't undo. Last Thursday, on the 7th run of Route 44A, at the final stop before the loop closed, the last pickup, the one closest to the transit center, a passenger boarded who I hadn't seen before. She was about 12, brown hair, pulled back. She was wearing a school sweatshirt, dark blue, the kind with the school name across the front in cracked white lettering. She had a backpack over one shoulder. She walked past me, swiped a bus pass, and sat in the front row, left side, the seat closest to the driver's partition. She looked like Sarah. Not exactly, not a copy, but the way the 44A passengers always look like people. An echo, a rhyme, a face translated into a slightly different language. She had Sarah's posture, Sarah's habit of tucking one foot under the opposite knee when she sits, Sarah's way of looking out the window without focusing on anything, watching the world go by with the particular patience of a child who has learned that the bus will get there when it gets there. She rode the last 2 minutes of the route in silence. When the loop closed and the doors opened, she stood up and walked past me and stepped off the bus, and I watched her cross the parking lot in the dark, and she walked the way Sarah walks, slightly pigeon-toed, leading with her right foot, and then she was gone. Sarah is upstairs right now, alive, real, doing homework. I can hear her music through the floor, but there's a bus pass in the kitchen junk drawer that I didn't buy and can't account for. It's a SATA monthly pass, valid through next month, WIC with no name printed on it. It's the right size for a student fare, and it's warm. I'm going to close this notebook now. I'm going to put it in the drawer. I'm going to go upstairs and check on the kids, and then I'm going to sleep. And tomorrow I will drive, because that is what I do, and I am very, very good at it. And the route is waiting, and the bus is ready, and the seat will be adjusted to my settings, and the mirrors will be angled for my eyes, and the passengers will board and sit and ride in silence through streets that don't exist except when I'm scheduled to find them. And I will be precise, and I will be calibrated, and I will arrive exactly on time at every stop because that is what Caroline Mays does. And then somewhere on Colliery Road, the lights will be warm, and the houses will be old, and the people on the porches will watch the bus pass, the way they've always watched it pass. And it will feel like the only place I've ever driven that was worth arriving at. The kitchen light is buzzing, a faint rhythmic pulse. I haven't heard it do that before. I'm not going to count the rhythm. I'm not.